brother, sister. Few decisions in an entire lifetime of parenting carry more genuine weight than who you actually trust to watch your children when you genuinely can't be there yourself. Scripture calls parents to genuine, ongoing vigilance over the children entrusted to them, and that responsibility never actually pauses simply because you're tired, genuinely busy, or genuinely need reliable help during a hard season. Most caregivers, whether close family members, hired sitters, or genuinely trusted friends, are exactly who they appear to be. Genuinely caring people worthy of real, deserved trust. But real trust was always meant to be built on real, verifiable information, not simply hope, convenience, or the sheer relief of finally finding help. Today we're naming 6 things worth taking seriously when deciding who watches your children, patterns that deserve real attention before you hand over that responsibility, not after something's already gone wrong and the opportunity for genuine prevention has already passed. This isn't about becoming paranoid toward every person in your child's life, treating every family gathering or church nursery like a genuine threat. It's about bringing the same genuine diligence to childcare decisions that this particular responsibility genuinely and rightly deserves. Stay with me. If you've ever felt a small, unexplained hesitation about someone caring for your children, this one's worth hearing all the way through. Think about the last time you actually chose someone to watch your children, whether recently or years ago. Was that decision made after genuine, careful consideration, or largely out of convenience, exhaustion, or simply not wanting to seem overly cautious to someone you were hoping would help you out? Most parents can honestly name at least one childcare decision made a little too quickly, under a little too much pressure, without the full diligence the responsibility genuinely deserved. The first thing worth real attention is someone who refuses, or gets visibly defensive about, a basic background check. A background check is a completely standard, entirely reasonable request in this exact context, and someone with genuinely nothing to hide typically has no real objection to it at all. Defensiveness, excuse-making, or outright refusal in response to this simple, entirely reasonable request is worth taking seriously as information, regardless of how trustworthy the person otherwise seems in conversation. This isn't about assuming guilt. It's about recognizing that genuine trustworthiness rarely resists basic verification. Consider how simple and routine this specific request has become in modern childcare, whether through a licensed agency, a church nursery program, or simply as standard practice among careful parents. Someone genuinely prepared to care for children professionally or regularly typically expects this question and answers it without hesitation, sometimes even offering the information proactively before you've had to ask. Real reluctance here is worth far more attention than any single excuse offered to explain it away. The second thing worth real attention is someone who consistently discourages check-ins, cameras, or any reasonable form of oversight during the time they're caring for your children. Reluctance around a simple phone check-in during the day. Discomfort with a nanny camera, even one disclosed openly and legally. Resistance to occasionally being observed or having another trusted adult stop by unannounced. Genuine caregivers, in the vast majority of cases, have no actual problem with reasonable oversight, precisely because they have nothing they're trying to keep hidden from you. A pattern of discouraging this kind of ordinary transparency deserves real attention rather than simply being brushed aside as an inconvenience. Notice how differently this actually plays out with a genuinely trustworthy caregiver compared to one exhibiting this particular pattern. A trustworthy sitter typically welcomes a quick check-in text, doesn't flinch at a disclosed camera, and generally understands that parental oversight is simply part of the arrangement, not a personal insult to their competence or character. Someone who reacts with disproportionate defensiveness to entirely reasonable oversight is showing you something worth taking seriously about how they actually view the relationship. The third thing worth real attention is someone without any verifiable references or actual work history you can genuinely confirm. Anyone can claim years of childcare experience or glowing character references. What actually matters is whether those claims can be verified through people you can genuinely reach and speak with directly, not simply names provided without any real way to follow up. Taking the time to actually call listed references, ask specific questions, and confirm details genuinely matters here, even when it feels like an inconvenient extra step in an already busy search for reliable help. Consider preparing a small, consistent set of specific questions for every reference you actually call, rather than a general, Open-ended, were they good? Ask about specific situations, how they handled a child's meltdown, how punctual and reliable they genuinely were, whether the reference would confidently trust them again with their own children. Specific questions tend to produce far more useful, honest answers than vague ones, and a referent's own hesitation in answering can itself be meaningful information. The fourth thing worth real attention is someone whose story about their own background shifts or contains inconsistencies you notice over time. A detail about previous employment that doesn't quite match up. An explanation for a gap in their history that changes slightly depending on when you ask. These inconsistencies don't automatically mean something is seriously wrong, but they're worth noting and, when appropriate, worth asking about directly rather than simply letting slide. Genuine honesty tends to remain consistent across repeated tellings, while fabricated stories often shift subtly under the weight of actually being retold multiple times. This doesn't require becoming an amateur investigator, cross-examining every detail with suspicion. It simply means paying genuine attention over time, across multiple conversations, rather than accepting a single first impression as the entire final picture. A pattern of small inconsistencies, noticed and considered together rather than individually dismissed, often reveals far more than any single conversation ever could on its own. The fifth thing worth real attention is someone who, in any way, encourages secrecy between your child and you, discouraging your child from openly sharing what happens during their time together. Healthy caregivers want an open, transparent relationship with parents, genuinely welcoming a child's natural tendency to talk freely about their day. Any pattern that instead cultivates secrecy, that makes a child feel like certain things shouldn't be mentioned to their parents, deserves serious and immediate attention. This is one of the clearest, most important patterns to take seriously, precisely because healthy relationships between caregivers and children were never meant to require any kind of secrecy at all. Make it a consistent, ongoing habit to ask your children open, genuine questions about their time with any caregiver, listening carefully not just to what they say, but to how comfortable they seem sharing it. A child who talks freely and happily about their time with a specific caregiver is showing you something genuinely reassuring. A child who becomes noticeably quiet, evasive, or hesitant when asked about specific caregivers deserves your continued, patient attention rather than a single conversation that simply moves on. And the sixth, maybe the one parents are most tempted to override with their own reasoning. Your own child seeming consistently uncomfortable or reluctant around this specific caregiver, especially when that discomfort gets dismissed rather than genuinely taken seriously. Children don't always have the words to articulate exactly why something feels wrong, but consistent reluctance, sudden behavioral changes, or a genuine unwillingness to be alone with a specific person is meaningful information that deserves your full, serious attention rather than being explained away as simple shyness or a passing phase. You know your own child, and their sustained discomfort around a specific person is worth trusting and investigating rather than dismissing. Consider how easily this specific signal gets rationalized away by well-meaning parents, especially when the caregiver in question is a family member, a longtime friend, or simply someone convenient and hard to imagine as a genuine concern. They're just shy. They'll warm up eventually. Sometimes these explanations are genuinely accurate, but a pattern of sustained, specific discomfort deserves more than a quick dismissal, and taking it seriously costs you very little compared to the genuine protection it can offer your child. So what does it actually look like to approach childcare decisions with genuine wisdom rather than either excessive fear or careless trust? It looks like actually requesting and following through on background checks. It looks like maintaining reasonable oversight without apology or excessive guilt about it. It looks like genuinely verifying references, rather than simply trusting names on a list. It looks like paying attention to inconsistencies, rather than dismissing them. It looks like protecting open, honest communication between you and your child above all else. And it looks like taking your own child's discomfort seriously every single time, without exception. None of this means treating every babysitter, every family member, or every trusted friend with suspicion. Most people caring for your children are exactly who they appear to be, worthy of real trust and real gratitude for the help they provide. But this specific responsibility deserves real diligence, and a little genuine care in the vetting process can spare your family real harm down the road. Here's a simple, practical checklist covering these 6 areas, If you want somewhere concrete to start applying this before your next childcare decision, before hiring or trusting anyone new with regular access to your children, actually request and review a background check, rather than simply asking whether they'd be willing to provide one. Establish clear, agreed-upon expectations around check-ins and reasonable oversight before care ever begins, rather than introducing that conversation after a concern has already arisen. Call at least 2 or 3 actual references directly, asking specific rather than general questions. Pay attention over time to how consistently someone's story about their own background holds together across multiple conversations. Regularly and genuinely ask your children open questions about their time with any caregiver, creating a consistent habit of open communication rather than a single conversation that happens once and is never revisited. And treat your own child's consistent discomfort around a specific person as meaningful information deserving genuine follow-up, not simply something to explain away for the sake of convenience. None of this is meant to make ordinary childcare feel like an exhausting, anxiety-driven process, or to suggest that every family member, longtime friend, or hired sitter deserves default suspicion. The overwhelming majority of people who care for children do so with genuine love and genuine trustworthiness. And most families navigate childcare decisions safely and well, precisely because most caregivers are exactly who they appear to be. The goal here isn't fear. It's simply informed, attentive diligence applied to one of the most consequential decisions any parent regularly makes. Consider how differently families navigate childcare when this kind of genuine diligence becomes a normal, unremarkable part of the process, rather than something that only gets considered after a specific concern has already arisen. Background checks become routine rather than awkward. Check-ins become expected rather than insulting. Open conversation with children about their caregivers becomes a natural, ongoing habit rather than a rare, isolated event. This kind of consistent diligence doesn't guarantee that nothing will ever go wrong, but it genuinely stacks meaningful protection in your family's favor. Scripture's call to watch carefully over those entrusted to our care has never been more directly applicable than it is in these specific, practical decisions about who actually spends time alone with our children. Genuine trust and genuine diligence were never actually opposites. Real love for your children includes the sometimes uncomfortable, sometimes inconvenient work of actually verifying who deserves that trust before it's ever extended. If this stirred something in you, brother, sister, don't scroll past it. Subscribe to Biblical Warning now, and let's keep examining these hidden places together, one warning at a time.